Okay, good evening all to those who I haven't said good evening to yet, or good afternoon in Klaas's case. He's a couple of hours earlier than where we are. Thank you all for joining us again this evening, 23rd of July. And we're quite excited to be talking about the Davidoff Special 53 cigar, which I hope most of you will get to taste tonight. We've got Klaas Kelner with us this evening. Klaas, if you want to quickly introduce yourself maybe to those who might not know you.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Klaas Kelner, as Roy said. I am a third generation in the tobacco industry, born and raised in Dominican Republic, and you could really say born and raised in the Davidoff factory. For those of you guys that might not know, my father is Henky Kelner. He's one of the instrumental people in making Davidoff what it is today, master blender of many of the Davidoff blends, and he was the general manager of the factory for many, many years. On the other side, I grew up with him and I grew up in the factory, but as of late, I've also taken on a lot of marketing roles. So my position right now is Senior Manager Brand Activation, or Brand Ambassador, if you will. And I cover the United States and I cover also all of Latin America. And from time to time, I get the pleasure to go to other territories and do live events for the UK, Europe, sometimes Asia. So I get to travel a lot and I get to talk to a lot of people around the world, which is always a pleasure. And I get to talk about my passion, which is cigars. Today, we're going to be covering one of our newest cigars. And you might have been to many of these seminars, or you might have been to one of my seminars previously, but I tend to get a little bit on the geeky, nerdy side, the tobacco side, because I like the science of it, and it really helps you understand why you like a certain product, why you like a certain cigar. So hopefully I can give you a lot of useful information today. Thank you.
We hope so too.
I'm looking forward to it.
I believe Mitchell just joined as well. I think I saw him earlier. Yep. Mitchell, good evening.
I think he's muted.
Good evening, everybody. I'm unmuted. Hello, Roy in the studio. Nice to see you.
And you, Mitchell.
Hello, Klaas.
Hi,
Nice to
Mitchell.
meet you. I know your father. I met him in Dominican Republic some years ago.
I heard about 20 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, he did the most amazing blending masterclass that opened my eyes to things that I never dreamt of, actually. It was fascinating.
It's probably the best Cigar 101 tasting seminar in the world. And I get the privilege of doing it nowadays. But you must have met me when I was 9 years old, more or less.
Wow.
So I was running around probably the dinner table, or maybe hiding under the dinner table back then.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Long time ago. Oh, hello, Edward.
I wouldn't remember.
Hello, Mitch. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm waiting to get permission to light up my cigar, unless I'm late already.
Light up, Edward. I like the beard. You could double as a bit of Father Christmas in the Christmas season.
Well, your times are tough. You know, you have to make some extra earnings.
Love it.
Well, you can light up, Edward. I think
You can light up, yeah.
as well.
Oh, lovely.
I've done already.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah.
Everybody else? Hi, Richard. You're a regular of ours.
Exactly, yeah. It's good to see some familiar faces. I think we've just had Matteo join, Ricardo from the Nicaraguan Embassy
Oh, hey, Ricardo.
as well.
Hey. I've had other ones with Davidoff. So tonight we've got Edward Sahakian, Davidoff London, and Klaas Kelner. Klaas
And Mitchell
Kelner,
Orchard, and yeah,
the master blender for Davidoff.
the son of the master blender of Davidoff, yeah.
Not there yet. Soon,
Yeah.
hopefully.
He'll get there. He'll get there. Can I just ask you all to mute your microphone while we have the discussions? And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and I'll unmute you so we can ask a question, just to cut out any background noises, etc., etc. and to make it a bit easier to follow the conversation for everyone. As I mentioned to some of you before, we are recording this session, which you can look back at the C.Gars YouTube channel. I think Anthony said somewhere tomorrow afternoon. So you can always look back and enjoy the conversation again. Thumbs up from Anthony, that's always good. So yeah, the Special 53, which we released in the UK 2 weeks ago actually. So quite excited to be talking about it tonight with Klaas. Can you start by telling us a bit about the history of the cigar, Klaas? Because it was first released in 2002.
Well, before we start, I know some of you guys already lit up and everything, but a lot of this history has to do with creation of wrapper in Dominican Republic. So as you started, if you already started, I hope you took the time to maybe taste the wrapper before lighting it, and then tasting the cigar on the cold draw. You'll see that there is really two distinct flavor notes there, where you're just tasting the wrapper before cut maybe, and then after you cut it open, you're taking a cold draw. And you're gonna see that this wrapper, just in taste without even lighting it, gives a nice sweetness to the overall experience right at the beginning. And this is gonna be a prevalent subject as we are tasting the whole cigar, this sweetness and this frontal stimulation, if you will, of the palate that is found at the tip of your tongue. But this cigar, Special 53, I'm from the U.S. market, and we in the U.S. market launched it 1st of July, and I'm very impressed, also very excited about the fact that in the U.S. Many boxes, thousands of boxes, we are already sold out, and they're already in all the stores. There was a lot of hype behind this cigar, and if you really look at the history, Davidoff didn't really start doing many limited editions till 2002. That's really when the whole, you could say, routine of every single year launching limited editions happened. And in 2002, we launched 2 limited editions. One was called the Special 53, which is this one, and the other one was called Special 48. And they actually were both perfecto shapes, but one was bigger, 53 ring gauge, and the other one was a little smaller, 48 ring gauge. And you might ask, that's weird. You might notice that that's not normal that Davidoff launches 2 limited editions exactly at the same time. And it all dates back to the history and the struggle of creating Dominican wrapper. And maybe you have all heard the story of Yamasa, right? The story of Yamasa, 20 years in the making to create a wrapper. And you could say that Davidoff Special 53 and Davidoff Special 48 were like the grandparents of the Yamasa project. And I say grandparents because right in between you also had another project which was called the Puro De Oro Project. And so Puro De Oro maybe was the son of Special 53, and Yamasa is the grandson of Special 53. And when we first started creating wrapper in the Dominican Republic, if you know, DR is not known for creating wrapper. DR is known for filler and binder, processing tobacco, supplying tobacco to different manufacturers, factories, cigar makers, and also machine made. We are one of the most important countries when it's supplying tobacco for this kind of things. Basically, we wanted to create wrapper for Dominican Republic. I'm 100% sure we're not the first ones to create a perfect wrapper or create a cigar that was 100% Dominican, because that's not hard to create. But we were the first ones to really capitalize on this idea of creating a cigar that was 100% Dominican. And making a cigar 100% Dominican meant that we had to really work on Dominican wrapper, which is not known for in Dominican Republic because of the investment, the size of the farms that you need to have, et cetera, et cetera. We can talk about that later. And when we first started, we had a lot of issues making this cigar, making this wrapper, and all the wrapper wasn't really growing to size. And only the biggest wrapper was made for the Special 53 batch, and the smaller wrapper, which wasn't growing as much, was made for the Special 48. It was just a size difference, the same flavors, but Special 53 was really the most well received, probably due to the size. And I'm just very glad that it's back. And I can talk a little bit more about the history and a little bit more of the details and the, you could say, inconveniences we went through when we were making this Dominican wrapper. Roy, is that a good introduction to Special 53?
Of course, yeah. Oh, very good, very good. So yeah, it was quite unusual also to make it in a perfecto shape at the time, I think.
Yeah.
And the 53 ring gauge, which was quite unusual. So what was the main reason now to bring this cigar back into life as such?
There's different reasons to it. You could say one of them is the having to reinvent yourself as a company and having to adapt to the situations in the markets. One of these situations, obviously, is the FDA in the United States that forces you to be limited on the number of cigars that you can create, introducing new cigars into different markets. So with this situation that happened with the FDA, you know that Davidoff has been re-releasing new older blends, and we have created a whole category for this. And we have taken this opportunity to create the vintage blend category. If you look at the box up here has this little ribbon, if you will, and it says vintage blend right there. And that basically means that this is a blend that was very successful in the past. It's a blend that's still sought out after, and we decided to relaunch it and make it available to the public. For me, it's very interesting for two reasons. First, because when this cigar was released, I was 12 years old. So if I had it, which is a possibility, I don't remember it. And the other thing that is very interesting is, besides people being able to try out a cigar that was around a long time ago, is it's interesting, if you have it, to try a cigar from 2002 and then try the new blend now. And you can see how aging really changes the cigar and how the experience can be completely different in many cases. In this case, I believe there's not a lot of people out there that have Special 53 from 2002. I had a friend that showed me one, and I was very jealous. But he did tell me that the cigar ages pretty well, and that's because the cigar has a certain amount of body, and it has the ability to age because of all the oils that it has in the tobacco.
And is that due to the Amasa wrapper, you think?
It's both. One of them is the wrapper, and the other one is the binder. Remember that both are Dominican, and in that case, you also have all the fillers that are Dominican. So this cigar is 100% Puro Dominican, but the wrapper itself, you can see, is very oily, has very thick burn lines. It has enough body to it, but you can also know that the inside also has enough body. So you're seeing that most of the tobaccos inside are about the Visu Seco end, and then there is not a lot of really low primings in the cigar. So it does have the ability to age. I don't know if you could age it for 18 years. Maybe Edward Sahakian is the expert at aging cigars, and maybe he could, but it is quite interesting to see how a cigar can age and change over time.
I'm sure it will age, and it will age very well. We've had this experience with many of the cigars. I had a very interesting experience with the Davidoff 3000s, the Dominican ones. And, initially they were quite mild. And we thought by the time a few years passed from it, it's going to be completely dead. And, I know you're not, so either you're not making them, or if you are, we're not getting them anyway.
Not making them, sadly.
But we had a few boxes around. And I tried one about a month ago or so with Eddie, and we both smoked it, and it's really delicious. And I think these cigars, any of these cigars, time and age does have its effect on it. Some of them more, some of them less, but it definitely will get better and better. It might have a curve where it will go down and then come up, but it will eventually get there. So if you have any boxes you don't know what to do with, send it to Royal and you'll give it to us.
Well, it's very interesting what you say, where normally we always talk about how there is a curve where it can get better and then it can get bad. And it's actually one of the first times, I've heard this before, but it's one of the first times that I hear somebody else mention it, where you can say it can get bad, but then it can get good again. And when I try to think of that in a scientific way, why might that be? And really you have to analyze the whole blend as a whole. Inside the cigar, there's all these different types of tobaccos, and they all have different amounts of oils, and these tobaccos separately have different amounts of potential aging. And if you are in a certain moment where the cigar, one of the tobaccos, it's at its bad point, and one of the other tobaccos are at its good point, and that one other tobacco still has to be aged a little bit more to catch up to the other one, that's also why it might also have that dip and then go back up. It really is all depending on the whole blend. And that's why you have to know what's inside the cigar and what are the capacity of each tobacco inside to know how much it can age. It impresses me, Eddie, that that you, or Edward, that you say that the 3000 many years later still has a lot of taste. It's a very mild cigar to begin with, but it's also depends on how you age it and what humidity you're aging it and under what conditions. So if you're aging it in your own home, you just have to be very particular about your different humidities. You can't have one humidor for aging and for consuming your cigars. You have to have two separate humidors with different humidities so that every cigar is at different moments. You can't enjoy a cigar if it's the same humidity as the other one that you...
I hope one day you will come to London and I will actually show it to you, but your dad has seen it. The way we age it, and that's where I keep my own cigars as well, is we keep them in a very low temperature, around 12 degrees centigrade, and lower humidity. It becomes like a slow burner, slowly, gradually, and you have to have patience. And with time, it just gets better and better. But you need to have the patience. You have to keep it cool, obviously, for many reasons. But also, I keep the humidity low, 60, 62%, no more than that.
We have a room, a big refrigerator in our factory that is kept. We put tobacco in there after we have sorted the wrapper. So the wrapper has still to be, has to have humidity. It still has to be elastic right before being applied into a cigar. But when a wrapper that we're sorting has a lot of oils in the high humidity of Dominican Republic, it can spoil if you are not putting it into the cigar right away. So we put this tobacco in our big fridge at about 16, 17 degrees Celsius for a couple of weeks before it goes into the cigar production part, so that it doesn't spoil and so that the humidity doesn't really affect the leaf. So what you're saying about reducing the temperature and reducing the humidity is very on point with what even we do at the factory. We went on a tangent, but it's a very interesting conversation.
It is, no, it is.
Ralph, can I ask one question? Sorry, Roy. The first time I smoked this was the first day we received it. It was probably a week or 10 days ago.
8th of July, yeah.
And my first reaction when I lit up the cigar, I have to admit, it's not my favorite shape of a cigar. Everybody knows that. I'm in love with the #2 format. But when I lit it up, my first reaction was it was such a creamy smoke and flavor coming into my mouth. I was really surprised. I did not expect to get that sort of a creaminess and sweetness from this young, well, it is a young cigar. How do you achieve that? I mean, how can you explain that? Is it the blends of the tobacco you used, or I don't know.
Well, there's two things to look at. First, interesting how you cut off the tip at the bottom of the foot. That might change some things. I don't cut off the tip. And when I first light it up, especially right at the beginning, we call this we call it El Volcán, the volcano phenomenon almost, where as it opens up, you get to start tasting all different types of tobacco. And right at the beginning, at the tip, you're only really tasting binder and wrapper. And even though it has a sweet taste on a cold taste with no lighting, at the smoke side, it has some spicy, some wooden taste, and it really starts opening up towards the front, and it gets a little bit more creamier as you continue to enjoy the cigar. So you're already enjoying it as the cigar at a point where it's a little creamier than at the beginning. Yeah. And that's one part. The other part is that, yes, this is a young cigar in manufacturing. Let's say it was made about a year ago, maybe max, but this tobacco inside is a minimum of 6 years old. So we're talking all the filler inside is minimum of 6 years old, 6, 7, 8 years old. The binder is 8 years old, and the wrapper is 10 years old. So that also has to do with the creaminess side of it, where the tobaccos have been a lot more refined and are not as rough. So it's a young cigar, but it's not young tobacco. It's aged tobacco.
It's a young, mature cigar. It's delicious. I'm really enjoying it.
And that always goes to the conversation that I always have with people. When you're aging cigars at your home, when you are talking about, does this cigar have potential to age? Really, when it comes to Davidoff, our blends are designed to be enjoyed at its moment when you receive it at the store. And it's because we do all the processing and all the aging beforehand. We make sure that all the tobaccos that are going to be introduced into the cigar have gone through all the processes beforehand. We're not putting young tobacco, unprocessed tobacco into cigars, and then you have to age it. We do all the aging before we make the cigar. That's why it's not an issue if the cigar has only been made for 3 months and you get your hands on it for whatever reason that early. Normally, the earliest you can get a cigar into a market from our factory, the earliest is about 3.5 to 4 months. And that would mean with the 2 months of resting period, with the 1 month of shipping, and then right away shipping. That's the earliest you could potentially get a cigar into market from our factory. But as long as the cigar has rested, which is those 2 first months, and the humidity in all the cigar is the same, then you're golden, because all our tobacco is already aged and it's already processed. It's not young tobacco in cigars.
So I want to step back to kind of 2002 when it was first released. So how do you, or how did, not necessarily you, but Davidoff in general, try to recreate that blend? Because I've used similar tobaccos, because it has an 18-year difference, so you get different soil impacts, etc., etc. The aging of the tobacco might have been different now than compared to 2002. So what are the main differences between the two?
Always
tricky question, I think, but
yeah. Well, no, always people ask me, they say, so how is it possible that you can make a blend from so many years ago and it be exact? And I'll tell you that in my personal opinion, it's pretty much impossible to get it exact. I don't think that's a possibility. There's too many variables into place. In this case, we do have all the written information about how the weather was that year. We have all the written information about how each tobacco tasted those years. And then we keep a track record of all the blends that we've ever created. So we have to look at the blend and all this information beforehand, and of course our memory to create of what we tasted before. I wouldn't be able to do this because I wasn't around back then. I could only look at the notes. But you have to use your memory, use your palate to remember, and then you look at the notes. And then you have to recreate it. I can tell you for a fact that this cigar is not 100% exactly the same. We have always, when we're trying to recreate a blend, we try to use exactly the same tobaccos, and then because of differentiation in years, we just use the same tobaccos, same regions, but then we adapt the blend and the percentages and the ratios of each tobacco to try to make it the same as possible. In this case, going back to 2002, we were still looking for Yamasa back then. And this tobacco from the late 90s is actually from, the wrapper that we used back in 2002 was actually from another region called Barrero. And if you've ever heard the story of Yamasa, Barreto was one of the first farms that we tried to get into. And we were growing tobacco there. It wasn't being as successful as we wanted to, but there was one day a very strong wind that came, almost like a tornado, like a small hurricane going through the farm, and it tore down one of our ranchos, one of our curing barns. Never before seen. We've never had another incident like this where a whole curing barn just falls apart. And my father will always say that he saw that as a sign from God that that was not the place to grow Dominican wrapper and that he needed to move somewhere else. So from Barreto, then he went to Yamasa. So today, the wrapper that we're using is not the same Barreto wrapper. It is the same type of seed. It's still an Habano seed created by us. It has, by seed genetics, the same similar kinds of flavors, but the soil is different. So we have to adapt also for the soil differences. And Yamasa tends to be a little bit on the spicy side. So we had to reduce tobaccos inside the blend that had that spicy component to try to even it out and try to make more or less the same blend that we had back in 2002. It's not an easy feat, and I don't think it's 100% perfect always, but we try our best to keep it as exactly the same as the previous blend. It's a little easier when you're doing it every single year.
No, exactly.
Not
Exactly.
18 years apart.
So, and the people involved in that would be Eladio, probably Henki, who still have the knowledge potentially of the previous blend.
And Peralta as well.
And Peralta, yeah.
Who was part of the farming of that tobacco.
Klaas, was there a difference of elevation between the two farms?
Elevation-wise, they were not very different. They're about we have meters in Dominican Republic.
We have it here as well. Tell me.
I don't think there's more than 30 meters in difference of elevation.
Oh, okay.
It's probably right about the same. But however, the biggest difference is that Yamasa is in its own little separate valley, you could say. And it's not as pronounced, the valley, but Yamasa soil is a lot more rough. It's a lot more mineral, more iron in the soil, where the soil in Barreto is, you could say, the pH levels are higher, are more normal in Barreto. It's more traditional growing area of tobacco, and the soil is a little softer. It doesn't have as many spices. So in Yamasa, it also rains a lot more. That's the other. So in Yamasa, there's a lot more rain. There's a lot more cloud coverage, and it has a better environment for growing wrapper in regards to weather. Just that the soil is very rough, very hard to deal with in Yamasa.
I heard it's more rocky as well, the soil. Is that true?
The grain of sand is thicker. So yes, it's not technically rocky, but it's more thicker. So this also
more resistance. It makes the roots have to fight more to find their way around.
Yes,
and that's what gives it the strength.
And it also leads to something else. It leads that because they're thicker, there's more space between each grain, and the water tends to drain faster in Yamasa. So even though it rains a lot more, the water drains down faster. So it's harder for the roots to grab water because it goes all the way down real quick. So there's a lot of complications in Yamasa that we have had to deal with and to make it what it is today. And that's one of them. The biggest one is the soil, but the weather conditions in Yamasa are much, much better for creating wrapper. And now in Yamasa, we also have we have shade grown. And because it's shade grown, we are able to achieve a much smoother wrapper. The 2002 version of the cigar was sun grown. So the wrapper was also a little bit more granular. It was also a little bit more thicker, which can also help balance out the spices, because that tobacco in Barreto had a little bit more thickness to it. Again, it's all these variables that you have to take into consideration, and it's almost impossible to juggle all of them and make exactly the same cigar.
So this wrapper was shade grown?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, okay. That's interesting.
If you look at Puro De Oro from 2010, 2012, 2013. You can, and you grab one of those cigars, you'll see that they're more granular, that they have a little bit more like little bumps.
It's very smooth, this one. Actually.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right.
There's a lot of challenges making a cigar that is that old, and I don't think we'll ever. I don't think it's humanly possible to get it exactly right because there's too many variables. I mean, meaning having a cigar with so many tobaccos, there's that many variables multiplied. So it's very, very interesting how we can try to recreate this and try to give you a more or less an idea of what we were having back then.
It's
We had a
beautiful.
question coming from Daniel Harris in the meantime. Daniel, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi, Klaus. Klaas, hi. It's a question for you, really. What were your memories and impressions back in 2002, aged, I think, probably 12, weren't you? Being the son of a premium tobacco blending big hitter. Sort of your experiences in that sort of a family and what your outlook was about your future, if anything.
Daniel, I can tell you that at the age of 12, you're not thinking too much about that. For me, at the age of 12, my father was just my father, and he would take me to the farm. For me, at the age of 12, my impression of my family was that we were farmers. We were farmers. We grew tobacco. We had cattle, rice, coffee, all these other things. And it didn't really start hitting me more till like in my mid-teens that I was the son of Henky Kelner, if you will. For me, Henky Kelner was dad, papi, you know. And I remember one time we were walking in Boston, and we were walking down the street, and there was a store, a cigar lounge. We just walked by it. We didn't even look into it or anything. We just walked by it, and 3 people just ran out and started hugging my father and started taking pictures with him. And I'm a teenager, younger teenager, and I'm like, who are you? I don't know you. And it was very interesting to grow in that mentality of just my father was my father. And then he would take me to the shows. He would take me to the IPCPR, back then RTDA in Las Vegas. And he would take me to some events, and I would just sit in the back, and I would smoke cigars at the age of 12, all the way down to the age of 7 at events. And it was just really part of our family. For me, cigars was just a natural thing to be around. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't premium. It was just...
It was just a necessity.
Yeah, no, it's almost like... It's like food. It's necessity. You know, it's water. It's just there, and it's always been.
It's your life.
It's my life.
Point. Yeah.
It's very interesting. But he always let us choose. He always let us decide what we wanted to do. And when you grow up with a family that is all interested in tobacco, and you grow up to going to these events and meeting so many beautiful people, you just fall in love with it. It's almost like there's no another option. It's just, oh, this is great already. Why fix what's broken? It's not broken, you know? Why fix what's not broken?
Right. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Peter asked a question, which I think you already kind of highlighted earlier, Klaas, was have you had the 2002 and how do you feel it compares? I don't believe you actually tried the 2002, have you?
I don't remember it if I did.
No.
The youngest cigar that I remember when I was like around that age was 2005 LEO 5 Avo. I remember the 2006 Diademas Finas. I was 15, 16 years old. But before that, I don't really remember these limited editions that much. It's interesting how it starts opening up, like I was saying. And where at the beginning, just the bind and the wrapper had all these woody notes towards the back of your palate. Now there's a lot more sweeter and a lot more spicier notes. And There's a little bit of acidity on the side. There's a little bit of citrusy on the side, but really most of the playing field of this cigar is really towards the center of your palate and towards the back and towards the front. There's not a lot going in the sides. If I had to describe it, it has a very like Habano style kind of stimulation, where it's very lineal with very little on the sides. It doesn't have too much.
I think looking at some of the comments, people say creamy, but just enough spice. Getting spicy in the second, third. I think Peter also mentioned it has an actual heat to it, but also creaminess, almost like a chili in a velvet glove.
In a velvet glove. It's interesting that he says there's smoke out of both ends and there's actual heat. Be careful how often you puff, how fast you enjoy a cigar, because personally I try to not enjoy the cigar as fast as possible. Talking here allows me to also take breaks between every puff, and hopefully my cigar doesn't go out on me because I talk too much. But I try to make sure, especially being a longer cigar, the smoke, especially at the beginning, should be coming in pretty cool. You shouldn't really start heating up till you're really past the halfway point, because if it's heating up, and that means that the smoke is going to hit your palate a lot harsher. It's going to stimulate it, your taste buds are going to be stimulated a little bit more precise, and it's going to be a little bit more aggressive because of that heat. So try to maintain a very even pace. I'm sorry, somebody on the second floor is having a party. I don't know if you guys hear that. Mm-hmm.
Just earlier a bit, I think somebody was moving a chair or something on the floor, but other than that, it seems to be fine from this side.
Good.
So in terms of a cigar pairing with a drink, what would your pairing of preference be for this particular cigar?
I did the tasting on the Facebook Live with Dalmor,
Yeah.
and well, Davidoff did it as well in German. So you have it right there, the cigar malt.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to, I'm lucky enough to be friends with the representative of the Dalmor here in Florida, and he also gave me some other goodies. So if you look at the Facebook Live event that we did, it's still there with the Dalmor. The cigar malt is an interesting option, but he did also give me other bottles, such as the 18 years, and then also Jura.
Yeah.
Jura. So I actually want to try this cigar with these two other options, because during the seminar, I was doing the cigar malt. The cigar malt is interesting because, as they were explaining on the show, it has it goes through 3 different aging processes, and then they mix them all in together, including a cherry oloroso barrel, and which gives a lot of sweetness. And there's 2 types of mentalities when you're going about pairing. One of them is about trying to match the stimulations already in the cigar, and the other style of pairing is trying to go the opposite direction. So you're trying to complement what's missing in the cigar. And when I think about this cigar in particular, there's a lot of wooden notes. There's some earthiness texture to it, and which is almost leathery towards the back of your palate. And there's a lot of playing of this cigar in the back with a lot of spices. And there's always that sweet component towards the front. But the cigar malt ends up, for me personally, in the show we say it goes perfectly, right? But personally, I think the cigar malt is on the sweeter side, and it does that opposite interaction where you're trying to balance out what's missing on the sweet side, because the cigar is so intense towards the back. There's a lot of stimulation going towards the back of your palate. So cigar malt is complementary. It balances out what is missing. And personally, I try to do the opposite. I try to match that bitter with bitter. I don't try to fight the bitter with something that is sweet. So I'm looking for other options for my personal enjoyment. For some people, the cigar malt might be perfect. For others, it might not be.
Have you tried it with rum?
Challenge the norm. So what did you say, Edward?
I wonder if, Klaas, you have tried it with rum.
I have one bottle of rum in here, which is the Bermúdez Aniversario, and it's a old style of rum making, more on the bitter side, with some slight spices. And I like that much better than trying it out with like a Brugal Leyenda, for example, or Zacapa, or anything that is very sweet. A lot of the newer rums that are coming out are very sweet and would have that cigar malt kind of experience where you have a lot of sweetness complementing the back of that cigar. So whether it's rum, whether it's whiskey, it really depends what you're trying to do. I like more old school kind of rums that have that stimulation towards the back and are not as sweet. I like more the bitter rums. And I don't like using the word bitter, but more wooden rums towards the back that use a lot of oak, that don't use the cherry oloroso cask.
I tried it the other day with chocolate milk after somebody recommended it. And that, funny enough, works really well.
Depends how much milk you put.
But it was actually, I think it was Reinhard who recommended it in one of his tastings he did. And yeah, actually, it worked quite well.
If Mitch is listening, I wonder what he enjoys it with.
Well, I always took the greatest tip from you many, many years ago. Forget all
vanilla ice cream.
Yeah, that was one of yours, Ed, when you told me at a cigar dinner, vanilla ice cream, and you showed me exactly how to do it. And I've been eating vanilla ice cream ever since, which is why I got so fat. So I blame you.
That is magical, actually. Yes, I'm happy you remember that you're doing it still.
You're my cigar merchant. You know, what can I tell you? You gave me the best tips. Other than that, obviously, I'm a Scotch drinker, and I'm very much a Speyside and Highland region drinker. I don't like Islas particularly, although my business partner, Ronnie, would say that he prefers Isla whiskey because he likes to challenge the flavours between the whiskey and the cigar, whereas I come from a different school of thought completely. I want them to be totally complementary, a marriage of flavours, but each to their own.
When I'm trying this Jura here, on the bottle it says they do age it in sherry cask, so there's some sweet notes to it, but there's a lot of smoky notes. There's peat in this one.
Yeah, well, it's the lightest of the Islas, really, Jura. It's very light on the peat, so yes, they generally go very well with the cigar.
I don't like whiskeys that are too smoky with cigars, unless the cigar has a lot of intensity towards the back. But this one doesn't have. Most of the flavor is towards the back, but it's not overwhelming. So this amount of smokiness from the Jura is definitely enough to complement in the back. It has the sweetness, which
that will work.
Has,
I think the problem is
works.
I think the problem is if you have an intense cigar, full flavored, full strength cigar, and you're having a really peaty Isla like a Bruichladdich, all you're doing is blowing your palate out. You know, within about 5 puffs and, you know, a few sips of your whiskey, your palate is completely jaded. There's no way you can experience the flavour of the cigar. As far as I'm concerned, it's gone. You're done. So it's just my opinion.
No, but
stick with the ice cream. Stick with the ice cream.
Well, I'm going to.
You don't want to have a drink that overpowers the cigar so much that then you can't taste the cigar.
For sure.
And that's what happens with a lot of heavily peated whiskeys, that the peat is so overwhelming that it just covers all the tasting notes that you're going to be having with a cigar. So I enjoy a light peated whiskey because it gives that stimulation towards the back that goes very well with the roasted coffee flavors, the dark chocolate flavors of cigars, the earthy flavors of cigars, the oak wood flavors, and it complements very well in the back. And what that creates is that it creates layers of flavors in the same area. That's why I like matching the same areas of stimulation, because if I have a cigar that is wooden, right, and I match it with something that is very sweet, then I'm just filling in the gaps. But if I'm able to match that wooden note with another drink that has also wooden notes, then I'm able to create a complex layered effect on my palate, and it creates a much more complex experience, as long as you're not blowing out your palate, of course. You know?
think the next whiskey I'll try, Mitchell, is one of yours actually, the Stella Do.
Oh, very good choice.
So yeah, it's also sherry card, so I'll give that a go now actually.
That'll work very well with this.
Yeah, I think so. I think some comments, so Peter said he should try whiskey ice cream instead of vanilla ice cream.
I've tried that as well. It's actually excellent.
Yeah.
It really is.
Super Nip says Macallan Rare Cask, which actually goes really well with the Roy Willies. Should you ever have a chance to smoke that? And somebody said Glenfiddich IPA Cask goes amazingly. There's a few chips right there. I see Joe is on the call, Joe Leary, who's actually opening, who wants to do more cigars around food. So Joe, I don't know if you're smoking the cigar or if you smoked it already. Yeah. From a food perspective, what are your thoughts?
I would say something zesty, something sort of lemony to cut through. That is quite a creamy flavour, and you get a lot of that sort of coffee and earth. So definitely, I like the idea of the ice cream. I like sorbets as well, sort of thinking more like the amuse-bouche, like those little palate cleansers, I think work really well. I think because when you're smoking a cigar and drinking a whiskey, it does tend to dry the palate out quite a lot. So keeping those sort of little refreshing things going is quite nice. So yeah, something maybe a little bit citrusy, sort of herbaceous sort of going on there. Maybe sort of like a lemon verbena, something like that to cut through. I think would work pretty well.
We were doing an event, an in-house event for the staff here the other day, and we brought in a guy that is one of the top cocktail makers in the Miami area, and he did cocktails for us here, and he brought all the ingredients so we could create the cocktails as well. And it was very interesting how, exactly like Joe was saying, a lot of these cocktails had that orange peel, had that lemon, had these citruses that we would introduce into the cocktail. And like he was saying, it would cut through it. I was saying that the cigar is predominantly spicy, wooden towards the back, and it does have not too much acidity. So it is a cigar that is on the drier side on the palate. Still maintains a nice humidity in the palate, but it's still on the drier side of cigars. So adding that acidity definitely helps break down a lot of these harsher stimulations that you're receiving, and it definitely balances out the creamy flavors in the palate. So great comment by Joe. I think you're on point with that. In my opinion, I do, however, want to know how all of you guys feel about adding ice cream, because I don't like changing the temperature in my palate, but it's very interesting how when you add ice cream, it really changes the whole feel of the effect, and it cools your palate, and then you got to warm it up again with the cigar, and you got this back and forth between cool and warm. So I don't know what is really the physical reaction or the chemical reaction that's going on in your palate when you're going back and forth between hot and cold. And that would be a very interesting thing to discover.
It works
A big cup of
perfectly.
vanilla ice cream, Klaas.
I'm going to have to go buy ice cream for me.
Exactly, yeah.
Mitchell shared that trick, and it was great. Absolutely brilliant with ice cream.
There's a comment about curry.
Yeah, well, I think
No curry.
How about either a curry, or what about whiskey ice cream, and then you marry the two beauties together?
Definitely no curry with cigars. Forget it. It ruins your palate. It's no way. Whiskey ice cream, it's good fun. Other than that, you go with the vanilla ice cream because it just gives you a crazy vanilla flavor, smoky explosion on your palate. No curry.
Fair enough.
Okay?
No curry. I just thought about the spicy. Would it marry with the spices? That was all.
No,
I think the problem. Yeah, I think the problem with the curry is it has too many different spices normally inside the curry, which plays with your palate, and I think it would just confuse you more than that it would go together.
Yeah, in fact, have a cigar before the curry.
Yeah, exactly.
Good work.
And after. Yeah. Cool. So yes, I'm about midway through the cigars. I think you're doing not too bad either. So it's a good sign. We allow you to smoke between your normal talking, which is Good thing.
Okay.
More wooden. As
Anthony says the tomahawk stalk at Saga. Oh yeah, you can't go wrong there, Anthony.
you guys here, Cigar got closed down.
Really?
Yeah. With all this going on, they just couldn't handle being closed for that long. But they do intend to reopen, maybe in another location. It doesn't really know, but it will come back in the future.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that Santiago is going to be missing, that tomahawk steak.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I think this is a cigar that goes very, very well with red meats, with heavier foods, because it really matches that. And again, just not something that is too spicy like curry, or not something that is too peppery, but try to match those tannic flavors towards the back of your palate. I think red wine as well, bolder red wines work very well with this cigar, because it just matches that stimulation towards the back that's going on with those tannins.
Cool. We talked a little bit about the vintage blend earlier, and then the idea behind it. I think last year we did a similar thing with the Especial 7, which was very popular. Do you think this will continue for the foreseeable future, bringing out old vintage blends in the next couple of years?
Oh yeah, you can expect a couple more. There's one right around the corner. There's not too many vintage blends to choose from. There's one around the corner to be on the lookout for. What I do like about these vintage blends is that they're all from the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and they really reflect what Davidoff was back then. And they use all those Dominican tobaccos that you know and have come to love from the white label cigars. So it works very well when you want to also rediscover these white label cigars. In this case, the Special 53 and all these vintage blends are almost like bolder expressions of the white label cigars. But if you are comparing it to something like an Annie No. 3, Annie No. 3 702, or the Millennium Blend, that's more or less the intensity that you're getting as well, just with different tobaccos, but it's on that same level of similar stimulations. Normally the white label cigars have a little bit more acidity, a little bit more creaminess going on, less wooden flavors. So that's just the only thing really that differentiates these vintage blends from the others. But be on the lookout, because one is right around the corner, and kind of excited about it.
Did you hear that story?
I know which one it is. So yeah, it was quite funny when Sam was in London last year, and we went to the Corinthia Hotel for lunch before we flew back, and I gave him a cigar, and he was like, "Oh wow, that's great, because yeah, that's actually the cigar which you're talking about, but the original release." Mm-hmm. And he didn't try the original release yet, so he was quite excited to see how they would even up. So that was quite a funny thing. But yeah, they should come out later this year. Don't know the exact date yet, but in the next couple of months, hopefully. Yeah.
I think in the US next month, but we'll see. Everything has been delayed due to the situation.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
The whole world has come to a stop for 3-4 months.
Sorry?
The whole world has come to a stop for 3-4 months.
It has a little bit, yeah. It has a little bit. I think the as I understood it, is the release of the cigar we're talking about is kind of depending on the success of this cigar. And I know in the US you're sold out. So yeah, that might speed things up a little bit in the US, but in the UK they're still around a little bit. So yeah, I would say it will be 2 months maybe before we see it in the UK. But,
and when it comes out, and you have all these vintage blends side by side, it's always going to be very interesting. If you have that Special 7, if you have that Special 53, the next one that's coming, and almost having them side by side. And it almost gives you an idea of how Davidoff evolved little by little into what it is today. Mm. Because we had all these core on all Dominican, smoother blends, and then we started really shifting over to much more more fuller bodied cigars, a little bit more intense, a little bit more wooden cigars, more pepper, and then we did the real big jump, and that's when we started really going into Nicaragua, Brazil, and really using tobaccos from other regions. But these are the cigars that really made the way to really evolve as a company to offer different kinds of cigars and different kinds of flavors to the consumer. So definitely really good to revisit these cigars in that case. Gives you an idea of how even our palates as people in the factory, master blenders, evolved. Because that's something very hard. As a master blender, you know your tobaccos, you know your palate, you know what you like, and then you have to really start evolving and start adapting to how the market feels and how the market evolves. So it's all together, and you can see how we were thinking back then.
Well, can I give you my take on that? How, with the benefit of selling Davidoff for over a quarter of a century now, for my take being on the UK market, because it's the only market I understand. The range, the classic range, back in the day was actually pretty boring. You know, they all tasted very light, very similar, and it was just boring. And we could never get any traction on the range at all, of any consequence at all. And we are volume sellers. But as the years have gone on and the ranges have developed into so many exciting new ranges, different regions, different blends, different sizes, different wrapper, a massive improvement on presentation, the explosion in Davidoff popularity is just breathtaking. So clearly you've done the right things at Davidoff, because it's now such a significant brand for the UK. And obviously I know it's always been a very significant brand worldwide, but you know, in the UK, until, I don't know, probably 6 years ago, it just really was kind of going sideways, kind of sliding around. You had people that would only smoke their Davidoff, their regular classic range, number twos, whatever, Anniversarios, Grand Crus, all very nice. But what we would describe as just a little bit boring. But as the ranges improved, wow, the popularity has just gone ballistic. So, you know, kudos to everybody at Davidoff, done an amazing job.
And that is specifically true to the European market, where we're in competition with the Cuban market. So that is almost the same for all the European market. There's some countries that are a little bit different, but like you're saying that, yeah, they were on the milder side, they were on the smoother side. But what I do appreciate is that because we have had the opportunity to introduce new flavors, new regions, and it has created this buzz around Davidoff, it's a way for a consumer to discover the brand, discover what it is, all the values that we stand for, which is a big one of it is quality control, consistency. And then they can go back to the core, try the smoother cigars, and they can appreciate it for what it is. And it's also being able to provide different kinds of flavors for different kinds of moments. Because I personally don't want to have a very bold cigar very early in the morning. So I can have now, because of the wide range that Davidoff provides, I can have a Davidoff cigar at any time of the day, and I can just choose different intensities and different flavors for all kinds of days. Back then, with all the white label, they were all very smooth with very few exceptions. So that meant that even at night, you were having a smooth cigar. Maybe when you really wanted to be introduced to much more bolder flavors, and you had maybe a bolder drink or bolder foods with much more flavors, and you didn't want your food to compete against a cigar. So you were looking for something more bolder. And that's why I really appreciate how we have evolved, and we are able to offer so many different kinds of flavors for different moments.
Well, it's obviously worked. Makes good sense. It's interesting you say that you're in competition with Cuban cigars. I don't know. I'm not sure I've ever really felt that in our market, because we have so many great new world brands. I just think as the new generation of cigar smokers have come along, I think people have been that generation has been more willing to try new world cigars. And I've never really felt in recent years, maybe I did early on, but not in the last 5, 6, 7 years, that people have said, oh, you know, I'm going to switch from a Havana cigar to Davidoff. I think maybe the new generation have said, I'm going to buy 10 different Davidoff cigars and 10 different Cuban cigars. They're just mixing it up more. They're experiencing a different experience from a different cigar, not really just a case of, I was a Havana cigar smoker, I'm now a Davidoff smoker. But I would agree with you that the quality control has been utterly nailed to perfection with Davidoff, but we never get a complaint. However, we do get a lot of complaints about Havana cigars.
Well, it's exactly what I'm saying. It's exactly what you're saying. Really, as of late, the new generation is coming in and they're much more open-minded. They have technology at their side and they work in their mindset with technology. So they expect a new iPhone coming out every year. They expect the new technology coming out and they are in this mindset of what's new. So that has also changed how us manufacturers and companies have to work in the market, because now we are providing a lot more new cigars, new blends globally across all different markets at a much rapid pace. There is, in my opinion, it's almost like a double-edged sword, in my opinion, because like I was saying, really Davidoff didn't start really doing limited editions till 2002 and onward. Before that, we were really doing just lines. And what having lines that stay for many years and pass the test of time does is that it creates the loyalty factor. When you have a line that's been around for so many years, the consistency and the quality has been great for so many years, you become loyal to that cigar and that cigar doesn't disappoint you. But when you are launching so many new lines globally as an industry, and what happens is that the consumer thinks, okay, what's new? And then they jump from the next one to the next one to the next one, and it creates less loyalty to the product, to the lines. So it's a lot harder to create lines that are going to be around for a long time. So you have to find that very nice balance where you're releasing new limited editions, but you're also creating lines that you want those lines to be around for a long time. It's been only a couple of years since we released the new Winston Churchill and the Winston Churchill Late Hour. But these are lines that we hope and expect that are going to be around forever and are going to be loyal and are going to pass the test of time. But it's very hard as an industry to introduce new lines and have them stick. So that's really the hardest part, I think, that companies have when they're launching new products, making it stick and creating a good loyal base from their consumers.
For sure.
I think what Mitchell said earlier, you know, it's I think UK is still a majority Cuban market, but as Mitchell said, in the last couple of years, you've really seen a switch to people being more open to trying new things, and you know, besides Davidoff, I think Total Imports has done a really great job in that as well, in bringing New World to the market, and that has really helped New World cigars in the UK in general. So we have the benefit of the construction, as Mitchell said as well. You know, we hardly get any complaints, if ever even, about the construction of Davidoff cigars, which is a big plus. And these days, people want value for money, in the terms that if they buy a cigar, they want it to smoke well and not be disappointed and have to go back to a shop saying, hey, it was plugged. So yeah, and that's our main benefit, I think. And I think Edward would say the same.
It's very interesting to ask people in stores, retailers, Edward, cigars. Do you say C.Gars? The cigars, C.Gars.
Cigars.
It's very interesting to ask you, your experience over the many years, how your humidor at a store has evolved. The percentage of Cuban versus New World versus Dominican versus Nicaraguan, and how the percentages that occupy your humidor has changed over the years, because that's always very interesting to analyze in different markets. The U.S. market has always been very varied, and we fight tooth, teeth, and nail for that space on the shelf with so many different brands. But in the European market, many years ago, it was almost 100% Cuban, and then Davidoff, maybe one or two other brands. But now you see in Europe, really that percentage of New World cigars taking up space of the Cuban percentage on the humidor.
It's a very good question. And if I look back to my first store, which was 100% Cuban, and how that's evolved over all of our stores now, I would say we're probably about 70% Cuban, 30% New World, although online, which is our biggest division, is probably about 60% Cuban and 40% New World now. But I could see some years ago, I predicted that it would go 50-50 by about next year. And I seem to be on target with that prediction between the balance of New World and Cuban. New World became so incredibly important to us as a revenue stream probably about 4 years ago. When we opened our first La Casa del Habano shop, we thought we've got a problem now, because we actually have a lot of clients who are, you know, very devoted to buying New World cigars. What do we do? Because obviously you can't have New World in a La Casa del Habano franchise store. So we literally made one complete walk-in humidor just for New World, and in a shop next door to the new shop that we had bought for the La Casa del Habano, because we simply couldn't make it economically viable to lose that lump of sales on New World in retail. So it goes to show you how important the whole New World category is. And a great part of that is Davidoff, who are, you know, very close partners of ours for many years now. And I can only see the category growing. I can see actually the whole premium cigar category growing in the UK, fortunately, and it has been for some years. But, you know, Davidoff has become massively important to us as our premium brand in the New World category, because it's very accessible, because they're very reliable. As Roy said, people expect a cigar to actually draw and burn, and of course they should do, because if they're paying, I don't care if they're paying £5 or £25, that cigar better draw and burn, or that customer better ask for his money back, because that's, you know, our job is not very complicated. All we've got to do is store those cigars in the correct condition, look after them. This isn't rocket science how to do that. And the cigar should do what it says on the can. It's supposed to actually draw, burn, and taste halfway decent. It may not be to the customer's palate. That's not our fault. That's his fault. The customer sometimes is the wrong customer for the cigar, as opposed to the cigar's, you know, wrong for the customer. But at the end of the day, for us, it's really down to quality control. The Cubans have not got it right, unfortunately. Wonderful cigars though they make. I adore Cuban cigars. But, you know, unfortunately, the proportion of duds is very high as I've ever known it. But conversely, you take Davidoffs, you take virtually every New World cigar, and they are 99.9% spot on every time. So, you know, selling them, which is my sole job, is much, much easier than selling Cubans, because you just don't get a complaint. It's amazing. It's incredible that it can be done in Dominica, you know, Honduras, Nicaragua. It can be done, but it doesn't ever seem to have been done in Cuba. I wish it would. Edward, what do you say? You're the expert. You're my expert.
No, well, in our shop, because of the nature of the shop, Davidoff has always had its prominent place. However, sales-wise, my figures are very much reflecting what you said, Mitch. You know, when in the early 90s, 1991, 92, when we switched from the Cuban Davidoffs to the Dominican ones, our sales dropped from 80% of our sales was Davidoff cigars, right down to less than 5%. And in the course of years, it more or less stayed around there, picked up slightly. But in the last 2, 3, 4 years, it's picked up momentum. And now, probably in the last 1 year alone, it's really starting to snowball. We're having problems keeping up with the stock, as Roy knows as well. You know, it's like before you would sell 1 box of Davidoff, you would get excited. Now suddenly the guy walks in, he wants 5 boxes of it. And so, hang on, 5 boxes, I only have 4 boxes in stock. And it is definitely picking up momentum. It has changed a lot as well. The Davidoff, which came out in 92, 93, 94, was nothing to be compared to what we're getting now. I mean, the cigars we're getting now, as you know, of course, apart from the presentation, we were getting some beautiful packaging, which was always nice, but now in particular it's nice. But the cigar itself, the taste of the cigars, the flavor, the variety that we are getting, it's just incredible. I mean, we're talking about Millennium blend, and then you suddenly remember, hang on, what about the late hours? It was one of my favorites. The Nicaraguan. It's just each one of them on its own is a delicious cigar. And to be honest, when we're talking about Cubans or Davidoffs, it's not that they're competing with each other. I think they're complementing each other as well. There are still times you want to pick up a Cuban and smoke it, and there are many, many times that you want to pick up a Davidoff and smoke it. It's just, it's starting to snowball. Now that little grain of tobacco now is turning into a huge bundle of tobacco. It is getting more and more demands. I was telling Roy just today, I said, you know, we're getting customers, repeat customers who want quantity, not just a few cigars of this, a few cigars of that, but quantities, boxes and boxes, which is wonderful.
No, it was quite a funny story you told me today that the gentleman went on a holiday for a couple of weeks and said, I need 300 Davidoff cigars for my 2-week holiday or whatever it was. Yeah.
Wow, that's a champion. I agree with Edwards, but you know, I've always thought variety is the spice of life. You know, I love drinking whiskey, but I also like rum sometimes, all different rums. So I drink Diet Coke, but once in a while you want a Diet 7-Up or Sprite. And you know, I was brought up with Cuban cigars. Probably until a few years before I got in the cigar business, I didn't really even think or reckon any New World cigars at all. But, you know, I absolutely love Cuban cigars. I smoke them all day, every day, more or less every day of the week. But you know what? There comes that time in the day that I just fancy a Davidoff late hour. It's variety, and people's minds are more open. This whole new generation of 25 to 45-year-olds, they're more into trying and, you know, mixing it up a little bit, and I think you have to, and I think it's good for your palate as well, you know, to educate your palate to try different cigars. And Karen came up with a good question. She said, why is it the Cubans can't, you know, do the same sort of quality control? And I won't say I'm any expert in what the answer is. Edward probably has as good an answer, if not better than me, but you just tend to wonder if you look at it and you say, well, essentially it's state controlled in Cuba. And there's no incentive for anybody to actually do a really fantastic job there, as far as I understand. But it's not in the other growing regions where it's actual commercial concerns that are very interested in getting it right all the time. I mean, 20 years ago, I went to the Davidoff factory and I've never seen anything like it. Having been to just about every factory in Cuba before that, the comparison blew me away. I was like, oh my God, this is hygienic, this is clean, this is organized, this is scientifically run, you know, with the right quantity and weight of tobacco of each leaf, and they're checked over and over again. You know, every part of the process is checked to produce a perfectly drawing cigar. I haven't seen that in Cuba in all my years of going to the factories year in, year out, you know, since 1997. I don't know what your view on it is, Edward, but they don't seem to be, you know, getting it any better at all than it ever was.
You're spot on, Mitch. Let me give you a little example. In Cuba, when we go to these hotels, places where there's a guy rolling cigars, and just for the fun of it, we buy a bunch of cigars. Every single one smokes beautifully, because the guy he's making it for himself.
Correct.
What we pay him goes straight into his pocket, and he makes sure that everyone is perfect. But that concept doesn't translate into the factories. In the factories, the guy doesn't really care.
Yeah.
You know, as long as he does so many cigars that he has to, if it's a bit too tight or too loose or even not the right size, the amount of times, you know, I open a box and you actually see the variety about 2, 3, 4, even 5 degrees of difference in the ring gauges in the same box. But that you will never get in the Davidoff one. You know, you see the quality control every time the cigar is handled by hand. In the Davidoff factory, there's a reject box there. And if the guy spots anything, he puts it in that box. End of the day, he gets a special bonus for finding these cigars and putting them aside. That does not exist in Cuba.
I think it's not only that. It's also the way they roll the cigars. You know, Davidoff uses the harmonica kind of method, which gives you better airflow.
The bunching sleeve, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's not only that, but it's just the harmonica which gives you a better airflow to the cigar, and the Cubans don't really do that. And I've been to factories in Cuba, in Nicaragua, and in Dominican Republic. And it was quite funny when I was in Cuba, and you go to the quality control room, and they're either playing cards or it's empty. And that's kind of where the problem lies, I think.
Well, that's one problem area. I know this isn't really a discussion about Cuba, but there's one story. I took my wife to the H. Upman factory a couple of years ago, and we got a fabulous tour by the director, absolutely fabulous from start to finish. And my wife was rather curious when we went into the drawer master room, where there were 6 drawer masters, and there were 3 people eating their lunch about, I don't know what time it was, 3 in the afternoon, and there was 2 people asleep at the end, but there wasn't one bloody cigar being draw tested.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, she was like, well, what's going on here? And I said, honey, not much. You know, what can I tell you? It was embarrassing, absolutely embarrassing. But, you know, maybe that was an isolated example. I've certainly seen draw testing going on in that factory before, in other factories. But, you know, I think probably Davidoff, I would guess, draw test about 100% of productions. Certainly there's no way they could get such a level of quality control on construction unless they were doing massive amounts of draw testing.
It's actually done by feel, not by machine.
Really?
Yeah. I think Klaas can probably explain it better than me. But every time I visit the factory, I'm amazed. They take us to that particular part of quality checking, and the guy literally, he feels the cigar for 2 seconds, and he knows if there's an issue with it, yes or no, if it's underfilled at some point or whatever. And they pass the cigar around to the people there to kind of see if they can find the fault with it. I think, Klaas, you could probably explain a bit better than I can.
Yeah, there is I'm not in favor of the draw master or machines that do draw testing. And one of the reasons why we don't do machines for draw testing is because to do the draw test, you have to do the draw test at the stage of the bunching. So the bunch has been done and both sides have to be cut open. Then after you do the draw test with the machine, it checks the airflow, the resistance, and then you add the wrapper on top. What happens is, because you have both ends cut up, because you have to put it to the machine, you have to, when you put on the wrapper, you have to fill it up here, and then it's harder to get a nice round head. So that's one of the reasons we don't use machines. And that way, when you cut, it doesn't blow up on you and there's no tobacco flying all over the place. But the other things that we do, I see there was a comment from Ian where he says that he once weighed one cigar and then weighed the same cigar again, and there was basically 2 grams of difference between one cigar and the other. For Davidoff, we weigh 50 cigars together, and every 50 cigars, sometimes 25 depending on the size, has a parameter of minimal depending of how much tobacco how big the cigar is, but the parameter is minimal. So between 50 cigars, the parameter has to be very, very, very tight, so that even at the weight time, it is perfect. And if the weight is off by even 0.1, then you have to go in and check every single cigar one by one again to find exactly the cigar that is off weight. And then after weighing, we also measure the cigars, 25 cigars or 50 cigars. And there is a parameter of 2 millimeters down and up of 50 cigars side by side that have to be exactly that same length of the measurement. And if it's 3 millimeters off, then we have to go in again and check every single cigar one by one again and find the one that is bad. Put every cigar through a ring gauge to make sure that every cigar is exactly the same ring gauge that it's supposed to be. And that's 50 cigars side by side. That guarantees you that there's not going to be a lot of discrepancy from one cigar to the next. And so there's a lot of quality control going on to make sure that the cigars are the right weight, the right draw, the right size. And then there was just to add a comment, I know I don't like comparing too much to other companies, but one time we had a Cuban delegation come to our factory to visit us and see how we do things. And we're all about increasing the quality control of the industry as a whole. So we don't mind if somebody comes to our factory and learns something from us. That would be great if Cuban Cigars could up their game in quality control. But one of their head supervisors visiting our factory about 10 years ago told us that they were 50 years behind us. And for it to come from them, say that, wow, you guys are 50 years ahead of us in technology, innovation, quality control processes. That is something pretty big coming from them.
Yeah.
And it's something that we
Sorry to interrupt, but if they said 50 years, the reality is 100 years.
But it all goes back again to what Joe was saying, Mitchell was saying, and that is that we are a privately owned company, and every cigar that is bad is $1 deducted from the privately owned company, family owned company. So we're not a government controlled organization, and neither are any of the factories from Nicaragua, from Honduras, from the Dominican Republic. So it's in our best interest to make sure that every single cigar that goes into a box is of utmost quality. And that's why I think the US market is a lot more demanding. They're used to having every single cigar perfect. And when they go to Europe, they sometimes get disappointed when they find a lot of one-offs that are bad here and there.
That's very true, very true.
I think I saw a question come by about rolling cigars, and the question was how much longer does it take to roll a Perfecto cigar compared to a similar straight 53 Wingate cigar?
We work in pairs in our factory, and in our factory, each pair makes about 450 to 500 cigars in one day. So 450 bunches, 450 wrappers applied, sometimes up to 500. When it comes to short filler cigars like our Primeros that come in tins, our pairs can make up to 600, 650. The Exquisito, which is the tiny mini cigar,
tiny one, yeah.
Long filler, the lady that puts on wrappers can put 900 in one day. That's because she doesn't have to do the head. You know, that Exquisito is cut on both ends because it's a cigarillo shape. But when it comes to Perfectos, depending on how hard of a Perfecto it is, if it's just a torpedo or a complete Perfecto like the Special 53, the number goes way down. It would be something like 300 a day, 250. The Royal Salomon is 100 to 150 a day. So it's much more complicated. It takes a lot more time, and you have to be a little bit more careful when they are turning the leaves at angles so that it doesn't break and it's perfectly stretched out and no pronounced veins show.
Perfect, thank you. I think we've talked quite a bit about the Special 53, but there was another cigar in the sampling pack we sold online, and there was the small batch. And some people have messaged me privately to find out a bit more about the small batch series and how that came about. And I think this specific one was the small batch number 7. And so, what can you tell us about the small batch range, and in particular the small batch number 7?
We had a program in the United States that was called Volt, and it's a program to release smaller quantities. We had the master selection. This program was basically utilizing blends that were not available to the market, that were great blends that for some reason or another, they were just not picked. Imagine in our company, we're making about 500 new blends every single year, and really only a handful make it into market. And some of those 500 blends can be really bad. So we do a lot of tests, trials and errors, and some of them turn to be very, very good. And this program evolved in such a way that we knew that was going to be very, very successful at a global level. And that's why we came out with the small batch series. A large number of small batches. Some are strictly for some markets, some are strictly for others. And the small batch number 7, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but we are sold out in the United States, so I can't have one right here with me. I didn't have one with me. But small batch number 7, it's just one of those creations that we wanted to make available for the world. In regards to keynotes and aromas, when I had it, I wrote my tasting notes. I actually have here a document of when I had it. And the key main aromas you're going to be getting from a small batch number 7 are coffee, nuttiness, some savory notes from the salted nuts, and you're also going to be getting a lot of wooden flavors. So it is predominantly a cigar that stays in the back of your palate, but there is a nice creamy component that keeps it balanced as well. But at the end of the day, it's on the bolder side, you could say, in regards to flavors and stimulations, but it's not a cigar that will overpower you. It's very balanced, but with most predominantly stimulations going to the back. I love the term that I was using back then, that was salted nuts, because that will give you an idea what savory is. Savory component, savory taste happens in the center of your palate and creates kind of like this spiciness, and also creates the sensation that you want to keep puffing at it. It makes you want to keep going back to it. It creates this sensation. I sometimes describe it using this, doing that. And by doing that, I kind of am able to describe that, it's good, it's tasty, it's savory, I want to keep puffing at it. But it's definitely one of those, I think all of the small batch are great. Doesn't matter which one they are, but they all taste different, and they are all different experiences. It's really finding the one that is just for you. But we have so many small batches. It's in the teens how many small batches we have. It's just really finding the one that is for you, and which one is the taste that you get. But we don't produce a lot, as the name implies. It is still small batch productions. They are not regular lines, and they are not as available as limited editions. They are even more exclusive. So what you guys have in your pack is something quite hard to find across markets and across the globe.
I think in the UK we had four different types of small batch. The number 7 being exclusive to Mitchell at C.Gars. I think Edward has the other 3 available. And they're all very different, and different shapes and different sizes and different flavors. That's good to try them all and see which one you like indeed. There was one question earlier, which was maybe not a question you would have the answer to. It might be more of a question for Sam, because it's about the Gestart edition, which is an edition made for Switzerland. I don't know if you've ever tried it.
I've tried many of them. But the Gestart edition is the Savoy Gestart editions was a cigar that we were making for an event in Switzerland, and it's picked fame over the years. And every single year we would do the same blend or similar blend in a different format. So all these Gestart editions, depending on the year, have different formats, very much like the small batch in that sense, but it was really exclusive to just one kind of event. In the last couple of years, it picked up some fame, and we decided to make it a little bit more available to different markets. So you might be able to find it here and there in different markets. But it was all about, it is a culinary event. So it is almost like the father of the chef's edition kind of idea, where you are trying to create a cigar for the culinary event with the help of the chefs and what they are intending to be making for that kind of event. And it always more on the flavorful side, more flavor than intensity in that case. You always want to keep your cigars more on the flavor side than strength, but there was specific there has always been specific attention to trying to maintain the Gestart on the flavorful side and never overpowering. They're very, very on the smoother, creamier side in most cases. But every year is a little bit different as well.
We recently had a request from somebody in the UK who was after some of those cigars from 2008, and we actually managed to get 8 boxes to head office, so they were still hiding away somewhere. So that was one happy customer for sure.
They're very hard to get.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tom had a question about the year of cigars, so the Zodiac range.
Mm-hmm.
So how many Zodiac ranges have been made so far?
I think now we are on our 9th.
8 or 9, yeah.
I think we're going to be on our 9th coming this year. And we are missing, this year is the year of the ox. We're missing the year of the rabbit and the year of the tiger. I think the tiger comes first. And
tiger is next year, yeah.
Yeah, tiger is next year. So I'm still very curious about what the rabbit is going to look like. But when you are thinking about year of the rat, or what's that going to be like? But year of the ox, as the name intends, you know that it's going to be a a flavor bomb, and you know that the cigar is also going to be probably on the larger size. And we normally are working on these year-offs about 1 to 2 years in advance. And it's just been a great project, very well received in that case. And it's always a fun game of trying to read up on what your zodiac sign means and how we can translate that to a cigar. It's very, very fun project in that case, because it's when there's an idea given to the factory. We have an idea, let's say year of the ox, we have to do investigation on what that means. And marketing comes first in this case. Sometimes it's the other way around, where we're creating a very good cigar, or we have an innovation that is out of this world, like a new wrapper, a new region like Yamasa. But definitely on the other way around, I think sometimes a little harder, where they come with this idea, hey, we're going to be working with chefs. Hey, we're going to be working with the zodiac signs now. And you have to really do research and try to create a cigar that follows the ideas of that marketing concept. It's a nice play between the marketing team and the factory team.
What zodiac sign are you?
I'm the horse.
You're the horse. Oh,
Yeah, so I personally, my personal comfort level ends at about 56 ring gauge. So when the horse came out at a 60 ring gauge, I was a little disappointed. But it is still a horse, so you have to make a cigar for what the horse means. One of my personal favorites was always the snake and the monkey. Those were really up there for me. But the horse, I still have a box of the horse, and it's very hard for me to go to it because of the 60 ring gauge. I got to be in a certain mood for that ring gauge.
And have quite a bit of time as well.
Yes.
Another question, Peter. What are your thoughts about the Nicaragua box pressed? We did a session with Sam actually a couple of weeks ago with the Nicaragua range, and he kind of explained more about the Nicaragua box press. But what are your thoughts about box pressing in general?
Box press it's interesting because for the longest I grew up with a company that was only doing perfecto shapes and parejo shapes, and we didn't do box press. When we first were asked to do box press for the Nicaragua line, we decided to actually do testing first with the Avo brand. So you know that we did an Avo for a trade show, TAA in the United States, and that was box press. And then we did the Avo box press, I believe it was a Synchro. And we first worked out all the kinks. As always, when you're trying to make a new cigar and it's going to be a Davidoff, you have to make sure it's going to be good. The same thing happened for the late hour. We didn't just start experimenting with barrels right off the gate for late hour. We first tried it with the Camacho brand, and we do our testing, our research, see how it works, work out the kinks, and then we tried to introduce it to the Davidoff brand. For Nicaragua, we took the opportunity to make it a little bit bolder. So the Davidoff Nicaragua that is parejo shape, it's a little bit more even, more balanced. I think it's a great representation of what what Nicaragua can be in the there you see, I see somebody showing the cigar. Yeah. But for the box press, we decided to go a little bit more fuller. We added a little bit more Esteli Ligero, so there's more pepper, more wooden notes in the back, more earthy notes. And the Robusto is a little bit more intense than the Toro because of its ring gauge and its shortness. And that reason, so out of all the Davidoff cigars that Davidoff makes that are regular lines available at all moments, for me, the Davidoff Nicaragua box press Robusto is probably one of the more intense cigars that we have. The Toro is a little bit more even. There's a little bit more airflow. The smoke comes in a little cooler into your palate. So it's a little bit less intense, kind of like the regular line. But definitely, if you're a box press guy, you'll just enjoy it because box press has this nice draw, this airy feeling, this cooler smoke in many ways, and it creates this just nice sensation where you are taking puffs. And for me, the Robusto fits perfectly between my two fingers, so it's very comfortable. It's very, very comfortable. It just doesn't roll. It won't roll off your ashtray.
So a lot of people like the aesthetics of it. You know, the box press feels better in their hand for some reason, and Yeah, it's always an interesting topic. As you kind of mentioned, Davidoff makes a lot of different cigars, a lot of SKUs, and a lot of different lines across the many years of existence. What, if you could smoke one Davidoff cigar for the rest of your life, what would that be?
If it's limited editions, should be off the table.
Limited editions off the table, yeah. From regular production, let's keep regular production.
I think the cigar that I enjoy the most on the most frequent basis is the Yamasa Robusto.
Okay.
And if I don't have time, then I go down to the Petite Churchill. I love the Yamasa in the smaller ring gauges because the Yamasa has the Yamasa binder and Yamasa wrapper. So you get that nice sweetness, spiciness that comes from that tobacco. And I love it in the Petite Churchill because of that. But after that, the cigar, the problem with Yamasa for me is that if I'm on an empty stomach, I can't have it.
No, sure.
It kills me. So normally the cigar I have the most on the most regular basis, even on an empty stomach in the mornings after the Yamasa, is the Grand Cru number 2. And the Grand Cru, it used to be the Grand Cru number 1, but now we don't make it.
Yeah.
So now it's the Grand Cru number 2. And it's normally the cigar I start out most of my days with. Early in the morning, empty stomach, just water, not even coffee, just nice relaxing start to my day. I don't want a cigar to take me down and then I can't work for the rest of the day.
And how much do you think, it's funny you mentioned the Yamasa, because obviously your father, Henke, he was kind of the person who created the Yamasa, or who was the first person to grow tobacco in the Yamasa region, and it took him many, many years. How much do you think that has been an influence on your choice? Because you know the backstory and how much work you put into it.
There is, of course, there is a sentimental value to it. And I've worked on that farm. There was one year that I worked it for there was one time I worked it for 2 years. And going to the Yamasa farm is a commitment. It's about a 3-hour drive from my hometown, Santiago. And then, so I got to leave at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I spent the whole day there, and I get back like at 7 o'clock in the afternoon. So there's definitely that sentimental emotion to the Yamasa. But remember that Yamasa is not a cigar that is 100% Dominican either. There's also Nicaraguan tobacco in it. There's the Condega, there's Estelí, and then it's balanced out by some other Dominican tobaccos. And I am, as my palate has evolved, I'm moving more towards those fuller bodied cigars, more complex, more flavorful cigars. So after the Yamasa, if I got to pick a bold cigar, then it would be the late hour. And I stick between the late hour and the Yamasa. I just enjoy the Yamasa more because I have that personal connection to it. And every time I smoke one, I get teletransported to the farm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And how about yourself, Mitchell? If you had to pick one Davidoff cigar to smoke for the rest of your life?
Late hour, Robusto.
Late hour, yeah. I thought you were going to say Escurio, but no.
Okay. No, it would definitely be late hour. And my partner, Ron, and I literally can spend an evening at puffin rooms or thermos, smoking them all night back to back. We absolutely love them. We think that is a blend that has been nailed to perfection. Amazing.
I'm surprised with that. I thought it'd be the London Lonsdale Orchard selection.
Well, we were excluding limited editions.
True, very true, yeah. Yeah, I think the late hour is probably the best sold cigar in the UK at the moment. Yeah.
Well, you guys have also that personal connection to Winston Churchill line. So
True, yeah, true.
That also resonates very well in your market.
Yeah. I think average for you would probably be the signature range.
For me, it's the Davidoff number 2, the signature range, or the 702. The format of the number 2. That will be my desert island cigar probably.
And Davidoff number 2 with a 702 wrapper, Davidoff 2000 with a 702 wrapper. If you're going to really be tasting that sweetness from that wrapper, it shines a lot on those very smooth, very light cigars to start with, because you can see that really big differentiation. If you are having Davidoff 702 with the Aniversario series, in particular the Annie number 3, I don't know if the Aniversario number 3 is available in the United States, in Europe. It is. You can't taste as much the wrapper because the Annie number 3 is already a much more fuller cigar than the signature series. So I was actually having an event. I was on a radio show Saturday morning a couple days ago, and the guy that was enjoying it, his favorite was also Davidoff number 2 702. It was early in the morning too. It was a great way to start the day. So I was also enjoying that cigar. I love the 702 in that in those smaller, softer formats.
One question from Daniel: how does the late hour Robusto differ to the Churchill in taste profile?
The blend is the same, but because it's Churchill size, like I was saying, it's going to be smoother and cooler. And it all goes back to how much the smoke travels through the cigar. So shorter cigars tend to be a little bit more intense because there's less filtration going through the cigar. Longer cigars have more filtration. So it really tones down the intensity that you receive the stimulations. It's still exactly the same. If you were to cut the Churchill down to the same size of the Robusto, you would be getting a very close stimulation, almost exactly the same. But because of the shape, you're getting a much more smoother, much more relaxed intensity than the smaller sizes.
Interesting, because I would have thought it'd be the opposite, because I always, well, from a Havana perspective, the larger the ring gauge, the cooler the draw. Theoretically, assuming it actually
cooler draw on longer ring gauges. Yes, cooler draw. It means that because it's cooler, your taste buds are being stimulated less aggressively, and then because it's also being filtered through the cigar, it also becomes less intense. A great example is the Grand Cru series, especially back then when we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Grand Cru. The Grand Cru 1, 2, 3 is a different blend ratio-wise than the blend for the 4 and the 5. And it's because for the 4 and 5, we had to tone it down a little bit, change the blend because it was gonna kick you too hard, and it was gonna be too close to the Aniversario line in taste. So we had to reduce the intensity of the 4 and the 5 because of the short shape. And so we also do blends depending on the sizes. For the Churchill, however, we don't. For the Churchill, we maintain the same blend. The only thing that changes is the length of the leaf.
I think a really interesting release earlier this year was the late hour Panatella.
Oh, that one kicks butt.
Sorry?
That one kicks butt.
It does, yeah. I remember we smoked it together in the Dominican Republic, and it was the first time I smoked it in March earlier this year. And it was good that we had it after a meal because it has so much flavor, so much power to it, actually. Compared to the Robusto or the Churchill, because you pack all that flavor into a little cigar.
Yeah,
but it was it was very popular in the UK. I think we sold out quite quickly. I think there's only a few retailers who have a little bit of stock left, and even it wasn't available in the US. But looking on social media, etc., a lot of people tried to get some over from Europe to try it, and some of them bought quite big.
And also that limited edition was short filler. The reason why it was launched as a limited edition is because we do not produce a significant amount of late hour cigars to have an unlimited stock of short filler for that cigar. So our short filler comes from the remains of our long filler lines. So because we only have 3 sizes of late hour, we don't have a great amount of short filler for that. So we had to release it as a limited edition. You never know, in the future it might come back out again once we have more short filler of late hour. But being in short filler also means that it burns quicker and burns faster. So that also allows for a little bit more intense stimulation from a little hotter smoke. And also less filtration because there's no veins in the inside that are filtering the smoke.
The packaging was beautiful as well. The beautiful packaging.
Just a note on the short filler. Yes, we take all our short filler from the remains of our long filler cigar. Let's say you're making a late hour Robusto, right? At the table, there is a hole with a cabinet underneath that catches all the remains of that tobacco. That tobacco then goes to another department where we clean the short filler. We clean it with 3 machines, and then a conveyor belt. It's cleaned by hand by ladies, making sure no big pieces were missed that maybe the machine might have missed. And we clean it about 4 times before it gets introduced into a cigar. It gets put into a bag for blend, and then it gets put into the cigar. So our short filler is extremely clean, and it also has, it's basically the same tobacco, the same processes, the same age, same fermentation than our long filler cigars. That applies for all of our short filler cigars, including the Primeros.
I think the benefit for the UK was also that it wasn't released in the US, so it was something more, maybe a bit more exclusive to the rest of the world, which I think appealed to a lot of people.
And the reason why we couldn't sell in the US is because of FDA.
FDA probably, yeah.
The only reason. If not, it would have also, which might have caused an issue with supply.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That was our good fortune. That was our good fortune.
It is, yeah. No, I've already been lobbying with head office to bring it out as a regular production, but yeah, as Klaas said, it might be difficult to get that amount of short for the tobacco to be able to do so. You know, let's see, in a couple of years maybe we might get lucky.
I hope so. It's the perfect cigar for a break, a short moment, a perfect cigar for an espresso, coffee. It goes very well. Those intense notes go very well with an espresso.
Oh yeah, and also chocolate, I find.
Yeah.
Because we love chocolate. Well, we're touching up nearly to 2 hours. So I think it's been a very informative session. I'm towards the end of my cigar, which is quite unusual actually, because normally I smoke quite quick. Well, exactly, yeah. About that for in as well. I think we'll finish off the session. Thank you, Klaas, for your time and for stepping in for Sam at late notice. It's always good to have a variety of people. We had
way better than Sam.
Sorry?
Way better than Sam.
Don't tell Switzerland.
No, exactly. We had George a couple of weeks ago talk about Camacho, which is also very interesting. So it's quite nice to have different people on these calls to tell a different side of the story and get a bit more background about the different brands. So thank you very much for your time. Same to Mitchell as always for hosting us for these sessions. It was good to have Edward as well with his long background of Davidoff cigars with us this evening and his insight on particular aging, I guess, which might be useful for a lot of people on the call. So yeah, I hope you all had a good session. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, it should be up on the C.Gars YouTube channel tomorrow or the day after. For those of you who follow Nick Hammond and his podcast Around the World in 80 Cigars, recently there was an episode about Klaas and Henke Kelner, which is a good thing to follow or to listen to. I found it very interesting actually, because I found a lot of things about Klaas which I didn't know, which is not always good, but at the end of the day. It was a very interesting listen. So if you have the time, it's about an hour. It's a good thing.
Klaus, please give our regards to Dad when you talk to him, please.
I talk to him every day. I'll let him know that you were on the call. He'll be very happy.
Please do. Thank you.
I'll just add my thanks to Klaas and Edward and Roy in the studio as ever, and everyone for joining us. Nice to have regulars. Thanks for coming back, Karen, and Jim and Tom. Hi, Tom, and Richard, and anyone else that I can't see on my screen. These are a lot of fun, especially in these crazy times. It's nice to actually see faces and put faces to names. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Have a good weekend, all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Brilliant.
All right.
Thank you.